Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain. What's up?
Well, it's a beautiful Thursday morning from here in Lagos. I'm Kayode Kikulu.
Just one day before Friday. Amaya Makinde, good morning and welcome.
What? Can anybody ever forget that? It's just one day before Friday. Oh, dear.
Just so you know.
You know what came to my mind when just opening? You can imagine how a British station will open in the morning. Football is coming home.
I know, if you want to pick a good fight, just say it's not coming home.
Has never come home.
55 years.
Oh dear. Well, that's for sports lovers. Yeah. But you know, back here, we've always grappled with, a number of things, but particularly emergency response, crisis management. How do you coordinate the crowd when there's an emergency out there? So yesterday, remember this simulation exercise that was that notice that we read out yesterday morning, how they had notified residents in Abuja that, look, if you find yourself in certain places, hey, just don't panic, just be careful that this is what's going to happen, such that you can afford it, because there was that simulation exercise organized by the Office of the NSA with planning, and backing by the US and the UK about emergency response. And they had to do with all the security agencies in the country. Because, clearly we know that we could always improve in that regard about how we manage things. Ordinarily, if it comes to your head, when there's, look at the little, it can't be little, because sometimes when you have accidents on the road, crowd encroachment is a huge challenge back here. How people respond to it, how we coordinate, has always been an issue. And remember, time and again, presidents, governments have talked about how do you get all those other agencies to work together, to cooperate, such that they learn how to work seamlessly amongst themselves. And then residents will equally talk about, emergency response to crisis, robbery, and things like that, improving their response time. Those are the kind of things that you like to see a lot of improvement in, such that, as part of that bridging or bridge building measure to ensure that security agencies regain the trust of Nigerians, because, look, a lot of success about some of these things globally, as a matter of fact, is based on trust from the people and security agencies by way of volunteering information. So all of those, pedals, tripod wearing things can work. So this one, as you can see, they're conducted in the National Stadium of Abuja. So a match was going on, and then people, a drill. Nicely, it's good to see this, really, because you don't see this all the time. I don't know if anybody has at all. But yeah, hoping that this will be the first of many, and then huge results too will always be expected.
And I think that's a very important point, the results, because like you said, this is a drill. Apparently, this is a yearly thing. This year's operation, or can I say simulation, is codenamed the Down Concon in Yoruba, which essentially means fast response, quick response.
Yeah.
I'm glad this is happening. Well, this is not the first time, clearly, but I'm glad this is happening. And of course, seeing the equipment that is being used there, it's quite encouraging. And if we could just replicate this across board, from the nation's capital to the nation's commercial capital to the ungoverned areas, because most of the attacks we have seen in recent times, those kidnappings, those bandit attacks, and the rest, have been in ungoverned areas, in quote, and you wonder just how will this work in so-called ungoverned areas. So I really do hope that there's a type of drill or simulation for those ungoverned areas, because speaking to the villagers or people in those areas that have been attacked, you hear, this attack happened for hours and there was no response. This attack happened, we made calls and we didn't get any response. So much so that people have had to just come up with their own security outfits, community security outfits. So it's important to have, this kind of arrangement, equipment, response, the interoperability, because I think it's quite important, working together, trickle down to the lowest ebb, for the lack of a better term, really, but, to that smallest, most minute part of the society, because that's when we can then say that we've been able to secure the country. It is good, like I said. Seeing that makes me feel good. It's almost like you're watching a movie. So, yeah, kudos.
I think the first thing that came to my mind when I saw it was, could we do this in Nollywood? you know. But
don't worry, we'll get there.
no, I mean, it actually does happen. Lately, incidentally, I've been seeing great improvement in Nigeria's movie space now. 5-10 years ago, I wouldn't watch, trust me. But, one of the things that came out to me is what you just mentioned now, which is how do the people not just receive it, but embrace it. We also see that a good number of people were involved in the simulation in that stadium in Abuja, and I'm just wondering, as you mentioned, Kaode, how do we percolate this information to the people? What would be their role in the event that such a thing happens in any environment that they find themselves? That's the one thing. So we have to find a way, not just to get the security operatives, as you have said, Chamberlain, to work together, but the people for whom they are doing these things, they also need to know what to do and how to cooperate with the security agencies so that they know how these things should work whenever, God forbid, such a thing happens to them. The second thing that happened that came to my mind is, so this is a simulation, and as we said, Kaode, it's an annual event. But what other sectors do we replicate such a thing? I remember in the aftermath of 9/11, I think it was it 9/11? Just one, something, security, some emergency that happened in the U.S., I think. The government of Fashola then brought a kind of recording, said, look, how do we replicate this kind of thing? What would our emergency response team? Chamberlain, you mentioned that. And that's been one of the challenges that we've had, for which we've been seeing a lot of losses of public property and all of that. So in fire response, what would be our response team? See what happened yesterday, the traffic buildup that Mokpe mentioned when the program was ending. Could that have been avoided? Because it didn't happen just about 30 minutes before. It happened quite a number of hours before. How can we replicate it such that such emergencies, we have a good enough response team to them? Fire response, accident response, health response, and stuff like that. So it would be good to also have all of those other things. And most importantly, is the infrastructure in the various areas where these things could happen. We always have intelligence information before any of these security challenges happen. Do we have infrastructure waiting there, the personnel waiting there, or at least within good enough distance so that in case of any emergency, there's that quick response?
This definitely is well received.
Absolutely.
Across the whole country. It's a very good one, and we hope that they'll continue in that light. But, as we said about the results, it's something everybody wants to see. Everybody wants to see the country succeed. Everybody wants to see our security agencies succeed. We all want to see people work together and get results. Who doesn't want a great country? Everybody wants a great country. But, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, if only, or maybe we could just take those baby steps to ensure that as much as possible, we insulate our security agencies from politics. Yeah, the elephant in the room.
We need a simulation for that.
If we can. You always talk about the trust that between the people and the citizens. People want to see them succeed.
Oh, yes.
We don't have any other, say, Nigerian Army, Nigerian Police, FRSC, NEMA. We don't have. These are the ones which we have, and we have to make the best out of them all. So it's a very good one. So we hope that they'll continue, and maybe, I think, just give them a little time. Maybe the states will begin to do the same thing, such that they'll manage them all properly. I think Lagos is talking about launching certain measures, device for traffic management.
Oh, yes.
So we're hoping, that all of those things too, will be deployed, and they will not be for punitive measures, just to ensure that above all else, the right things are done. Then, you could just keep soaring, I might add. All right, that's it. Let's take a look at the dailies this morning and see what they reflect. We're going to start with Vanguard today. The front page story, Budget 2022. FG to fund 5.62 trillion naira deficit with loans. Yep, you heard. Look at the riders as FEC OK's 2022-2024 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework, MTEF, and Fiscal Strategy Paper, FSP, OK's 16 billion naira erosion control contract under Ecological Fund. Yeah, the famous Ecological Fund, where you deduct certain fund, certain percentage into the, from, the Fed account into this. So, and then, states are supposed to get that fund and utilize them properly. So, and then they provide key assumptions, key budget assumptions. And you see, Senate approves Buhari's 2.343 trillion naira external borrowing request. Page 8. Yep. So, there you go. That's the big one right here. And at the bottom strip, right there, I don't know who can't relate with this one. Okay, that's, or many can. Tough times await airlines over flight delays, cancellations. 7,554 domestic flights delayed in Q1 2022 out of 14,662. Tougher regulations, sanctions on the way, NCAA, FCCPC. Wow. So, make of that what you will, but it's on the front page.
So the question you want to ask is, well, as you would say, maybe the details are on the inside pages. Why?
Why what?
Those delays, more than 500 delays.
Well, that's what they discussed with the Senate, so I guess they'll go ahead and see that. And I see what's at the back page of Vanguard Sports, Euro 2020. It's England versus Italy. 3 Lions and 55-year wait. So football fans, you could go to the back page and digest a lot more right there with Vanguard today.
Well, coming back to Nigeria. Nigerian Tribune leads with this one, 2022 budget. FG to fund 5.62 trillion naira deficit with loans. NAS increases 2021 supplementary budget by 87 billion naira. And I was just going to mention that, put that in context. Don't forget that I think the capital component of the 2020 budget was meant to last up to March 2021 this year. Yep. So we're still effectively sort of transiting from the 2020 budget to the 2021 budget, and now we're talking about the 2022 budget. And one of the things that is quite, similar in those budgets is the loan component, the borrowing component. It's a lot to talk about.
Up to that, the loan servicing.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That's the crucial part, actually.
I mean, this is a huge one, really. And, of course, we're going to be giving you some breakdown this morning. Page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune has more details. You see that picture on the front page, Yoruba Nation agitators protesting in Ibadan, demanding the release of 13 aides of Sunday Igboho who were arrested during that midnight raid by the DSS. So that's the picture you see there. On top of the nameplate, you see 950 students abducted since December 2020, or UNICEF is keeping count, 950. You can imagine what that is doing to parents, the education sector, and so much more. Security story there, page 12. Let me just take one more. This one was trending. Adeosun vindicated as court says NYC certificate not required for political appointment. Now, the ramification of this particular judgment is huge. It is really huge. It's on
Even though there are questions about that, really.
Oh, definitely. Page 28 of the Nigerian Tribune. There's that Boko Haram attack, and just this final one. Trump sues Twitter, Google, Facebook. Wonder why? Page 13.
Who will wonder? Still on loans, the Guardian newspaper takes this perspective on its front page. Just to remind you that the debt profile is rising. Fresh loan request pushes Nigeria's public debt to over 35.5 trillion naira. Yep, that's what you have there. Buhari gets Senate's approval for 2.3 trillion naira foreign loan requests. Senate OK's 982 billion naira supplementary budget increases proposal by 86.9 billion naira. FG to fund 5.62 trillion naira deficit in 2022 budget with loans. Nigeria on debt precipice spent 1.8 trillion naira on debt servicing between January and May 2021. I told you it's a major issue. Government records debt service to revenue ratio of 98%. You mentioned this yesterday, Chamberlain, and that's what you have on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning. And right under the pictures you see there, Buhari has mismanaged Nigeria's diversity, says Colonel Abubakar Umar. Injustice, lack of equity, insecurity, greatest threat to country survival, not IPOB. The story continues on page 2 of the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Okay, so on to Daily Independent next, and they've got, I think it's a little different from budget stories from these first 3 this morning. They go the political story. So you see, APC caretaker committee tenure extension polarizes party. So that's what you see right there. And then they say, Tinubu camp unhappy, says they are strategizing. Situation not good for party's health. Sage. So, you know, that's a big one they've got right there. And then at the bottom strip, yeah, they didn't completely neglect it. FEC projects 9.16 trillion naira revenue, 5.62 trillion naira deficit for 2022 budget. Okay, it's $57 oil price benchmark, 1.88. Okay, and oil production. I'm just trying to look if I can see this. Oil production. Okay, approved 16 billion naira for ecological project, and it goes on and on. So, yeah, just fine print. Sometimes it looks like fine print. You need to squint and look at it properly. So there you go. These are the main ones you see on the front page of the Independent.
For the Daily Trust, the big one is health related. It says concerns as polio variant hits 13 states, FCT. Nigeria could lose wild polio-free status, experts. I mean, recall we just recently celebrated that polio-free status after years. I mean, yeah. There was a relapse, then we came back, and now.
The announcement of polio-free status was just barely a year ago. Absolutely. And now this variant. And you know what's curious? I mean, when you look at the figures, the details are on the inside pages.
You had to hold yourself there. It's very, very good.
To help him hold himself.
But experts have more. Say COVID-19 insurgency worsens situation. And there's this insight, how wild polio virus differs from CVDPV2. You wonder what that means. Well, page 5 of the Daily Trust. She'll have more details. And there's a picture on the front page, as you can see, that shows scene of an explosion at Ladipo Street, Mushin, Lagos, yesterday. And right under that, Lagos traders lose goods worth millions in Ladipo market fire. You know, I mean, one of the people that was affected was saying, I mean, being a trader in car spare parts, he lost about 10 million, thereabouts. And wow. I mean, that's a story of one out of many. It's a huge one. And, you know, seeing that we've seen these fires from time to time, you wonder, is there anything that can be done to, I mean, as you say, nip that in the bud? Don't forget, we just saw the emergency response drill, so maybe that would help.
Exactly.
For this one. Page 10 of a Daily Trust. Experts suggest 5 cattle production systems for Nigeria. That might interest you. Page 21, especially because this has been major cause of concern, insecurity, I should say. So page 21 for that. And there's sports, of course, on the back page. That's the Daily Trust.
Well, still talking about children, the Leadership newspaper is also interested in children. And this is the reference on the front page. 40 days after abduction, Niger Islamia pupils' health deteriorates. Stories on page 4. Majority of them can't walk again, says teacher. Bandits reduce ransom to 50 million naira from 200 million naira. Gunmen kill 19 in Adamawa villages. That story continues on the inside pages. I want to believe that someone is as concerned as everyone is on this, because Their pupils, they're just little children.
And I'm sorry, I mean, seeing the ransom that is demanded of the parents of these students who, I mean, you've seen the schools, 200 million, 50 million, it begs the question, are they really doing the kidnapping for ransom? Perhaps there's something else at play here, because if you demand 200 million from parents who are putting their children in
the kind of schools, yeah.
Anyway.
Again, question you want to ask, is it calling attention to something that we're not aware of? Well, the details are on the inside pages, right? Under the nameplate, FG increases 2022 budget by 3% to 13.98 trillion naira. That's more on the loan topic we started talking about earlier. Pegs oil benchmark at $57 and 410 naira to the dollar for exchange rate. Story continues on page 4. Southwest leaders raise committee on PIB constitution review. Find that on page 7 of the leadership newspaper this morning.
Well, take a look at News Direct. 2021 budget. Senate approves 2.34 trillion naira foreign loan request. So, you know, it's pretty much the same budget story which you see elsewhere. So, you might want to take a look at that. That's News Direct today.
Well, Blueprint leads with this one. COAS, yeah. Have sent bandits, others to God to answer for their crimes. What an interesting way to put it. Assures of diligent anti-terrorism fight. Buhari elevates COAS to Lieutenant General. Insurgents kill 18 in Boss Mustafa's Adamawa community. I mean, coming on the heels of the celebration, the Army Day celebration, you were wondering, oh dear, the big one there. It's on page 6 and page 8.
I find that headline actually quite curious. Send them to God.
Well, this is other one under that big picture that shows the president and vice president decorating the new chief of army staff. Pension. Court orders El Rufai to pay 71 retired perm-secs, HOS, SSGs. To page 7. So,
Should have not heard the last of that.
Okay. I'm wondering if there was even a need for that in the first place.
Yeah. So there you go. That ends it with a look at some of the dailies here this morning. We're back in a moment. So stay with us.
Lawmakers in the Green Chamber settle down to the business of the day. They begin by responding to reports in the public space that the National Assembly plans to exclude electronic transmission of results during the passage of the much-anticipated Electoral Act Amendment Bill.
Mr. Speaker, I've been part of the process of this new law. I've gone through all the stages of this law. There was never a time I and my colleagues were involved in such.
Because of the cacophony of voices, and because you have raised that matter of privilege, and I guess to allay fears, let me just say that I have asked the chairman of the committee. She is not aware of any such, so it remains in the realm of speculation, and we'll wait till the committee submits its report.
And following the increased attacks on INEC facilities, the House of Representatives is urging the federal government to provide adequate security in all INEC offices nationwide.
At least 19 INEC offices have been gutted by fire with a ratio of 1 INEC office per month. Concerned that if nothing is done to forestall future occurrences, there will not be adequate INEC offices to coordinate the 2023 and off-season elections in Nigeria.
Meanwhile, a bill to give legal backing to creation of state police and other state government security services scales second reading.
Mr. Speaker, we have heard about the Hisba police in Kano. We've heard about the Amotekun that has been in the southwest, and then we've heard about the Ebubagu in southeast. These are efforts by state government to try to fill in the gap and then fill in the lacuna that has existed because of the overwhelming nature of the security crisis in this country on the police.
We have had situations in this country that ordinarily this issue of state police should have been addressed long time ago. But good enough, the recurrence with which it appears and comes up in efforts to alter the Constitution gives vent to the fact that it is needed.
The bill seeks to move the legislation of policing from the exclusive to the concurrent list. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
All right, so yeah, that's where we start off this morning, and they are in Abuja. Hello, Makwe.
Hello, Chamberlain, and good morning to our viewers. And good morning to our guest here in the studio. We have with us Mr. Ezekiel Nyaitok, who's the Director General of Nigeria First Project. Thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily.
Pleasure to be here.
You're saluting like you're reporting for duty.
Exactly.
And we also have Mr. Yunus Tanko, who is the former presidential candidate of the National Conscience Party. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Good morning, Jamo.
Good morning. Interesting times we've been in, especially looking at what's been happening at the National Assembly. First it was the PIB, and then just when we heard that the PIB was about to be passed, then we now heard about the Electoral Act as well. Well, the Electoral Act has been on the table for some time, with CSOs calling our attention to it to, push the National Assembly to eventually pass the amendments before even the Anambra elections. And the National Assembly did give its word that it was going to be passed in the first quarter of the year. Sadly, that wasn't done, despite the work done by committee members. Only for us to now start hearing about this smuggling or changing of clauses in the bill. But then we have heard denials on the part of members of the House, especially the Speaker of the House of Representatives, saying there is no such thing. How has this allayed your fears? Let me start with you, Mr. Etok.
The very first thing is that I feel pained by the extent to which Mr. President does not seem to understand the priorities in governance. And I say this with every sense of responsibility.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President. I'll start from him. Secondly, I do not know if I should say I feel disappointed. Not really disappointed. Because by the time these National Assembly members were contesting elections, the amount of money they spent, the extent to which it was a do-or-die affair, should have told us that they were coming in not for service, but it was a transaction. As a result, when they get into office, you should naturally expect them to get what they got in there for. And the time has come when Nigerians need to really know that you can't have your cake and eat it, and nobody's a fool. So what they are doing really does not in any way surprise me. I'll tell you why I said Mr. President first. The National Assembly is like expecting a dog to meow or a cat to bark. They sold their soul, their lives, everything to pay us at election, and we happily collected the money. Okay? So when they go in, they should recoup their investment. On account of that...
Are you being fair to all members of the National Assembly?
I should not use the same brush to paint everybody.
Indeed.
So I shouldn't do that. But the fact is that I'm referring to over 80% of the people. And the average Nigerian knows that I'm telling the truth. Okay? So it's transactional. And the third set of people I blame is the Nigerians. If you want somebody wants to wash your dress for you, and the person is paying you to wash your dress, common sense should tell you that there's something you should look at again. You should pay the person, you should beg the person to wash your dress, to serve you. Nobody pays you to serve you. It doesn't work that way. Back to Mr. President. This is a man who's been a head of state before in this country. This is a man who's been everything. This is a man who is old and retiring. This is a man who's wanted to be Mr. President for 3 terms before he got the 3rd term, before the 4th time he succeeded. He should understand what governance is all about. He should understand what service, giving back to the country is all about. Why would a man who has been unjustly treated, according to him, 3 times, he's gone as far as to the Supreme Court, eventually get into office? And his first priority is not to set straight the processes that have meted such injustices on him on 3 occasions. He gets the 1st term. He finishes the 1st term. The electoral bill came, and he says, it's too late for me to sign it now. There'll be confusion. Forgetting that Goodluck Jonathan signed it almost on the day of election to allow for electronic voting, which worked for him. He says it's too close. So now we took it that he's a very prim and proper person. He doesn't want to rush or rock the process. Now it is 2 years, over 2 years, into his 2nd term, and less than 2 years to the next general election. And Mr. President
not making any excuses, but we have to put into context, you know, things that have happened in the 2nd year particularly.
Yes.
The fact that there was COVID and there was very little...
While these were going on, approvals for loans were coming faster. And I want to ask you, my sister, between approval for loans and electoral law sanitization, which is higher priority? So as things were going on, loans were being approved timelessly.
So, well, there will be huge questions on that one. But, you know, for the Joint Committee members who had their sit-in, they said their work was finished by early this year, that they had since finished it and transmitted it to the leadership of the House. But let me quickly, of the National Assembly, I think I need to be more specific. Let me quickly take the thoughts of Mr. Tanko on this. I think you addressed the press conference on this Electoral Act, is that correct?
That's correct.
The amendment. And you had your fears. Shortly afterwards was when we heard the Speaker. I mean, we saw a member of the House of Representatives raised a matter of privilege. He said his privilege had been breached. And the Speaker of the House, you know, reassured himself and all Nigerians who were watching that nothing has been done, to the best of his knowledge, about the Electoral Act. It's still the same way it's been transmitted. The gazetted version done by the joint committees is what is still in the position of the leadership, or at least in his possession. We haven't heard categorical statements from the Senate, but coming from the Speaker, did that feel reassuring to you after you addressed the press conference?
Well, yes, it is. This is the kind of thing that we want to, because we are preempting them. And you see, when it starts like this, you just hear that they are coming, oh, they are not coming, they are coming, you are doubtful. And then before you know it, they are overwhelming you. And this is when the whole process of clean, free, and fair elections start from. If you miss it from this point, at the end of it, what you have is wrong process of election. What you have at the end of it, you have problems with INEC. What you have eventually is that you have violence in the system. At the end of it all, what do you have? You have leaders who have no business with governance. And this is exactly what will have been the end product of missing this particular process now. And that's why we came out en masse to really follow the process and how they are going about it.
What piques your suspicions? I'm very interested in that.
Good. The truth about it is that, first of all, there was Section 3, subsection 3 of that particular Electoral Act. The presumed doctored document states that there was a proposal that INEC should get its allocation yearly. And then 2 years before the process of election, at least their money should have been given to them so that they will have good organization and nobody interfere with the issue of financing and all. But the doctor document was saying that, no, it will be 1 year prior to that particular elections. And then before you knew it, INEC will be running cap in hand, asking for political parties to support them, or even the government begging them to give them money to run election. And of course, that gives room for corrupt tendencies. That was one. Two, the issue of Section 50, subsection 2, would deal with the electoral reporting of voting. All of us applauded INEC. INEC is trying to do everything that it can to ensure that we have clean, clear election, coming from a backdrop of a lot of accusations. Now, there was an improvement in what we saw in Edo and Ondo. Every one of us was happy about the way in which the transmission of results. You and I know, and every Nigerian know that at a point in time when we're having election, you will find out that there are people on the social media who create sensational results. In Edo and Ondo, there was no room at all for that, because the result that was transmitted at the polling station was the same result that was already transmitted by INEC, and the same result that any other person who wants to be a social media soldier is transmitting. So there was trust being built. The issue of collation center was completely almost eliminated, which was a big problem for a lot of political parties, not being able to get election. You may have voting taking place in the polling station. The result will be different before you knew it. And that was taken care of. Then Section 65 would deal with the issue of duress of announcing of result. And that was some of the things that happened in Imo State. And here we are saying that INEC should have an opportunity 7 days after the election to, review the result. And they are saying no to that particular area. Section 76 was talking about registration of political parties. Of course, in that area, that INEC should, of course, can be taken to court 7 days after maybe denial of approval. Finally, come the issue of Section 88. Section 88 was talking about campaign financing. We all are aware of this particular humongous use of money to buy votes. Now you are saying that you are jacking up the proposed 1 billion naira from presidential campaign expenditure to 15 billion. The question is that where do you expect these people to get this kind of money from?
So what they say is they have raised the cap. It doesn't mean that you have to spend up to the cap.
If you raise the cap, then you're giving room for people to hide under it if they spend within that particular period amount, and even to bribe, or they have enough to source for funding from any kind of places. And that denies other individuals who want to have a kind of a credible election. We have candidates who do not have this huge sum of money. Pegging it to that particular 1 billion naira is more or less like saying, okay, look, you don't have that laxity of resources to even go into possibility of manipulating the system. We are also talking about the issue of political nomadism, which is key. Majority of the political parties that are deregistered today have been deregistered because they were not able to win political party offices. And I give an example of the National Conscience Party as a case study. When we won election in Ekiti State, before you knew it, our members ran away and joined the PDP. And there was no punishment. And he will maintain his seat. That is the most annoying part of it. You cannot win election and sell a social contract within yourself to the electorate, and then within a short period of time, you change to another political party, carrying another manifesto to that particular, and then maintaining your seat. It's a treasonable offense against the people that elected you.
Have you tried to, I don't know whether they have an attempt to at least correct that in the Electoral Act.
I don't think they have.
But what I'm very interested in, you have stated the areas where you notice discrepancies.
Yes.
The question is, what's the source? Because some people will
say
that maybe this was all a hoax, maybe this was just maybe testing of the waters, maybe there was really no smoke. So maybe there was no fire anywhere.
No.
And we all were just getting alarmed over nothing.
Before it gets started, that's why I told you that when they're telling you they are coming, I say, no, they are not coming. Before you knew it, they overwhelmed you. So we are being careful. We've had series of opportunities. We've let it loose for a very long time. From both the political parties, the civil society, and the rest. We allow these people to take charge of these particular rules and regulation of engagement because they are in position of power. And they are making a mistake because the previous experience has shown that if you make faulty rules, you will end up being affected in the future. They should ask the other people who have been in power the first time before them. So now they are making rules, and we have sense to believe that because there was a nomination by Mr. President of an aide of his to become a member of the umpire, thereby polluting the system. If that situation comes in...
We will talk about that. We will talk about that.
So we are being careful.
What I want to know is whether or not you feel reassured after the speaker spoke. Did you feel a sense of reassurance, or did you still have doubts in your mind?
Well, at this point in time, as he has already denied that there's nothing like that, it's good. We will further wish that what is already put on the table should be made public, so that we will know that the document that they are trying to pass contain A, B, C as agreed, even though all of it, all of the document, all of the position is not all that is agreeable by all of us, but at least let's have the minimum threshold that every Nigerian will be happy. It builds trust. It takes away all of these problems. Even the issue of insecurity in the country. If you have good leaders, you won't have insecurity. Because at the end of it all, it affects everybody. So it affects them as much as it affects us. So before they get it wrongly, let us start putting them on their arse and say, look, checkmate, be careful.
Let me repose that question to Mr. because when I asked you that question, somehow I think the answer I was expecting wasn't what I got. I'll ask again. So he says that at least he feels some sense of reassurance. Did you feel the same, or do you want some concurrence from the Senate?
Before the reassurance, the smoking gun. When someone tells you, I'll let this out by next month, and the committee have finished their work, they finished their work. It's just to lay before the House. And then the time came, you delayed by several months. The question is, why was the delay? That's the smoking gun. Some people must have said, no, it can't be. And in the National Assembly or within political circles, you know this as much as I do, that the moment people are uncomfortable, the next thing is to try to change the areas of their discomfort. Number two, what they do not know, which they should know that they should know by now, is that there are some members who by convention are not coming back to the National Assembly because in some areas you have zoning. For instance, I'm from Ikotekpene Senatorial District, and we used to rotate between two axes, back 5, Ikotekpene 5, and use you one term, you know, before somebody was smart enough to do something else. But there are some people that have that convention that has been over the period. As a result, some of the members of the National Assembly, we have been able to run rings around them to be able to extract things from them because they are like, nothing to lose, I'm not coming back. So they should know that we have almost verbatim report of every committee proceedings. And that these people already have some of those documents. So if they make any alteration, we already know what the original documents are. And some of us, I came in from Uyo, we are ready to go and, no violence, sit down. Because this process, they can't change it. I am telling you, and take my word, they cannot change it. Cannot. Not should not. Cannot. Because we are sick and tired of being taken for granted. Even if it's not perfect, at least what we have seen so far will make for some level of sanity. Tanko has just said that transmission of results is one of the biggest frauds in this country, one of the worst frauds you can imagine. Now, by the time that you have 20 votes in your unit, you have, in my unit, 10, then 10, you put it together, and they discover that you are making progress. They just discard everything that has been written. They go to the what was this officers, they call them again? Coalition officers. And they just change everything. By the time you see the final figures, and you know their law, announce, we go to court. That is, it started from somewhere in Delta State some time back. Just announce, we'll meet in court. So by the time you have the electronic transmission of results, the question of announcing results under duress does not quite come up again, because even before you announce, you're not really quite significant. It's just a ceremony. Because INEC already has all the results at the back end. And because we know that our vote will count, people were starting to like warm up. So whether he says it or the Senate president says it, I am honestly not bothered. I'm waiting for the thing to be laid in the House. There's some parts I'm not comfortable with, no problem. No law is perfect. But that one that was arrived at by the Joint Committee, Nigerians have it. Every reasonable, responsible Nigerian has it. And by the time they lay it on the floor of the House, and it is not what was agreed, and some members are willing to testify, okay, somebody will have to tell us who altered it, and we will get to the root of it. This is not going to be a family affair. This is a Nigerian thing, and it's not about... Tanko and I, we're not in the same party, okay? He's in NCP, I'm in ADC. But we are agreed. PDP, APC, we are agreed. We are unanimous in the fact that let this thing be done free, fair, credible. And that's it. So whether the speaker has said it, I'm happy he said it, and his integrity is on the line. Nigerians are watching. And I hope that the Senate president can also say something. His silence is deafening.
Well, I do know that recently there was an event, an inauguration of one of the government agencies, and he did say that if people are uncomfortable with any provisions of the Electoral Act, they will have to see their representatives to deal with it. The question is... No,
those are two different issues. He's being smart. I'm sorry, maybe smart by half. No,
the question a number of Nigerians will ask is which version of the electoral...
Thank you. Thank you. He did not address, but Mila, with all due respect, address the fact that there's no alteration. He is saying if you are uncomfortable, if you are not okay with what we have, the question is like you asked, which of the versions of what we have? There are some parts of the original version which we have access to that we'll not be comfortable with. But it doesn't matter. It can be done with next time, since the committees have come to that conclusion. But that one where they don't reach you, the one where we don't see now, they don't go change that.
Why this is extremely important, why the version story is important. I remember my colleague having a conversation with Senator Kabiru Gaya of the Senate Committee on Electoral Matters, and I think on INEC as well. And also Honorable Solomon Bob from the House. And there were versions of which he was quoting, putting questions to Senator Gaya, talking about this cap, which is now being increased for electoral, for campaigns. And Senator Gaya didn't deny the figures. Instead, he justified them. And the justification, it was, it made a lot of sense. For now, for a long time, the cap had been at, I think, at 1 billion naira for presidential. And it would seem that no party, or maybe very few parties, the two major parties have oftentimes obeyed the law in breach. And some people have said, well, that is, first and foremost, it doesn't define when the campaign starts. Which part of the campaigns is it? Is it from when you start lobbying your members within the party? Is it from, is it when you become a candidate? It is not very specific. Is it when you're still an aspirant?
I think it should be when you become a candidate. As an aspirant, you're not on election box.
So that's one. And then the second is, but all those funds will count. The second is inflation. We have to take inflation into context as well. What are your thoughts on that? I know you have very strong issues with that particular provision because you think that somehow it removes the smaller political parties.
Yes.
But if this particular provision has been obeyed more in the breach than, following the letters, and there have been very little consequences, don't you think that there needs to be a more realistic review of these figures?
Even as it's were. The campaign expenditure fund, how well has it been managed or been enforced or been dealt with if they are found in defect of the action? That is the reason why majority of us has clamored that INEC should be balkanized. in such a way that we have an enforcement agency to take care of these issues of malfeasance in our electoral process. Look, nobody has been arrested or dealt with for using campaign funds beyond the threshold that has been established. And we allow it, and then it puts a lot of people in danger. Look, what it does to the system is very, very sad. 15 billion, for example. You ask for a candidate, and majority of these candidates who are running for election are either in position of power already. What they do is assumably they siphon treasury from the resources of the country. Money that were meant for developmental processes are put in the hands of one individual, and then he has to find a way of getting his own share of it, use it again at the detriment of the people to finance his own election, making it difficult for those who may be better than he or she at the polls to run for election. So giving that opportunity is more or less that encouraging corruption. So, but when you limit it to a level, it gives room for people who do not have that sum of money, at least it's curtailed. People who, you know you don't have that money, so who would you give the money to? You wouldn't give it out. So you will be curtailed. But when you have that particular opportunity of getting this, and this is what they said, oh, let me look for more so that I can be able. Can you imagine at a polling station giving an agent 10,000 naira, 120 now increase? Can you make that mathematics? That's a huge sum of money.
That's one way of thinking about it.
Yes.
I do recall that prior to the 2015 elections, when the APC was newly formed, they did try to find a creative way to raise funds from amongst Nigerians. But I think that means was stopped by the then ruling party or so, that it wasn't within the norms, or it was not allowed, so to speak. Something, I can't quite remember what it was, but I think it was to make a process easy for Nigerians who are interested to give. Yes. You could do the donation over your phone.
Yes.
So assuming a political party, a small political party,
yes,
you know, and I use that word advisedly,
yes,
were to find a creative way to get Nigerians to buy into its own vision and wants to raise funds, do you think that it wants to be limited by how much it could raise if it needs to match the bigger political parties? I'm posing this to Mr.
It's where I have a reservation and disagreement with the original version. I believe that figure, unfortunately, I will disagree with my brother here. I believe that figure is so grossly unrealistic.
15 billion?
Even 15 billion. Not to talk of 1 billion. The reason is this. I want to run a campaign, and I come up with, like I have, social governance ideology, and it resonates with the people. We need to make sure that campaign is funded and run by the people. The people of Akwa Ibom State, for instance, say, look, we want to raise 1,000 for you. And then there's a mass mobilization, a mass movement of people, and they want to do that for me, because people are believing that this government, if you leave them the way they are, digging into the treasuries and they think they will always do it, that there has to be a way of changing the narrative. And as a result, people are coming in. Now, if I want to have a campaign office, I can either pay for that office or somebody donates that office. If somebody donates that office, how do you quantify the cost to that? Somebody can donate his vehicle, which I could have bought. People can donate things. Let us not bother ourselves. There are certain limits that are ridiculous. For instance, 15 billion is less than 500 million per state for a campaign for presidency. Okay? And I'm thinking of Mr. President who wants to set up his structure in my state, which is Akwa Ibom State. What figure? We have 31 local government areas. What sort of figure makes it reasonable for him to spend in each local government area? If you're talking of like 10 million, I don't think it's absolutely ridiculous, okay? For 10 million for a local government that has about 11 wards, okay, which is like 1 million per ward. It's not really, really horrible or horrendous. If you take, say, 10 million, that's about 300 million in Akwa Ibom State. Let's take Akwa Ibom as a model, and you say 300 million. If you multiply that by about 31 states, you are getting close to 10 billion. Is the base figure unrealistic of 1 million per ward? It is not unrealistic. On the other hand, if you now bring it down to 1 billion, because that's 10 billion, you're talking about 100,000 naira per ward. Now, that could be absolutely ridiculous because some local governments have as much as 14 wards. You're talking in terms of 50,000 naira per ward. I mean, it doesn't really make sense. So if you're a small party, is there any way you can network the people so that the rent that the big party paid for, it is supplied? The vehicles that the big party paid for, it can be supplied. Let's make the processes free, fair, and credible, and the people will migrate to the smaller parties, knowing their votes will count, and the money of the big parties can be reduced to nonsense. So let's have a credible way of making people know that their votes will count, and then we'll be able to match indirectly the resources. But don't go and approve something ridiculous like 50 billion, or it doesn't make sense. Let the cap be what makes sense.
Let us take a break. I'll let you intervene in this matter when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. Oh, yes, indeed. Our mailbox was full yesterday to bursting point, and I hope that you see some of your mails being taken there. And today, as much as possible, we will be taking the feedback we'll get from you, as many as we can. But in the meantime, during the breaks, you will be seeing some of your mails on display. We'll still have with us Mr. Ezekiel Etok, DG, Nigeria First Project, and also Mr. Yunus Tanko, former presidential candidate of the National Conscience Party. And we're talking about the proposed electoral amendment and the controversy that has since dogged this particular amendment, at least the version which is now said to be in the possession of the leadership of the National Assembly. And we're talking about a particular provision just before we went on break. You're about to intervene on the cap.
Yes, I was about saying that the issue is about transparency and reduction of corrupt manipulation in the system. Now, don't forget, we want the people to own the process. Each of these political parties are supposed to have structures down to the ward. So it's not a 4-year market that you always, head of them will waiting for money to be brought in by any presidential candidate at a point in time to run for election. And that would not give credibility to the system at all. It will not give ownership to the people. Normal election is being run by the people from the grassroots. They even support their candidate by donations and making flyers and all of those ones. So that way, there will not be a kind of say that... Okay,
how do you quantify that? Shouldn't that count as well?
That will be...
as part of the 15 billion?
No, that will be expenditures of the political party at each of their ward level. Every political
party... That will not come into the campaign funds?
No.
It will not count as campaign funds?
When it's campaign period, of course it will count. But every party structure needs to account for its expenditure at every point in time. And that's why we're supposed to have auditors going around and ensuring that how much was generated. The issue here is transparency. Take a look at the case of United States.
No, what I'm asking you is this.
No.
Mr. Etok made reference to donations being made.
Yes.
You have also made allusions to that. That
yes.
At the grassroots levels, people could support, their candidates or their political parties by printing flyers and things of the sort. Those are not direct funds given to the political party.
Yes.
And if an auditor were to audit, I don't know how that was going to be captured, that people just made flyers, for instance, in support. They don't have to even give it directly to the political parties before it is distributed. It could be of their own free will to just do it in their own community, and that's that. How do you, assuming that were to be captured in the expenditure of the political party, how do you monetize that? How do you quantify that?
But this one is being given specifically by the appropriate for the presidential or any other election specifically. And all other expenditures, of course, the party expenses that comes along with it. Okay, you can assume that it is part of the support for campaign, election and all. But it has been pegged that this is what you can spend as a presidential candidate. It's specific. Okay, you didn't say the general political party. So when you jam it together, it becomes an issue. But then you have to account that so amount of money being generated by this party to support the political candidate. But the presidential candidate spend X amount of money. It's being specific. And that is the reason why.
You agree with that?
How do you quantify the cost of Mr. President going with the country's jet to all his campaigns?
That is unacceptable. That is unacceptable.
How do you quantify that cost?
That's not acceptable because in the political party, look at what happened in Brazil. You know, the Silva at the point in time was sanctioned because of when he was going to a party meeting, he used the presidential jet.
I think that monitoring campaign funds has been an exercise in futility. Rather, we should have certain policies. If you are contesting and you are a governor, maybe 6 months or as soon as campaign starts, make sure that you leave the instruments of state, probably hand over to maybe the speaker or something, and operate your campaign from your funds and party funds. Because you see this fleet of 50 SUVs intimidating opponents, and they're all government vehicles funded by public money. I want to contest against maybe my governor, for instance. Part of my taxpayers' money is being given to my opponent who has 50 SUVs going for a campaign and woo-woo. And then I'm now going with maybe 10, and I look like Boy Scout. And you know, politics is visibility. It's like, this one won't be governor. He sees only 1, 2, 3, they are counting my cars. But the other one comes and like, wow, 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 with siren on top. I mean, it doesn't, those are the sort of laws I'm expecting people to make for a level playing ground. But we can't be, some people like are rich, some people have the capacity, and they want some styles and finesse into their campaign. I don't have any problem. I mean, I can say that because by God's grace, I'm likely contesting in my state against people that when you hear is like, wow, how else? But I'm not bothered by them because if the electoral process is fair, you will know that a state like Akwa Ibom State, as much as people think people run after money, people have a very sense of do-rightness. But they're like, brother, you know, these people, they will do what they want to do. There's no need wasting. But the moment that the coast is clear, just tell me, bring your billions, I don't care, but let it be your money, not my taxpayers' money, okay? Bring it, two can play. I'm ready to match it because I'm ready to go down. And secondly, INEC should be able to, even for reason of the health situation of the country, ban these rallies. Because these rallies is about spending money, speaking loud and saying nothing. Reduce it because of COVID protocols to town hall meetings.
Even in the heat of
yeah, I mean, it doesn't make... Those are the sort of regulations.
In the heat of COVID, when we thought, okay, the Edo elections were going to... You saw the controversy.
What's so difficult, I ask, in saying, reduce your campaigns to town hall meetings. Have one mega rally if you must. Do you understand me? Because part of this spending that the big parties...
In fairness to the candidates, they did try to reduce the crowd at their events. I mean, I think it went from ward to ward. It was a lot more
Let it become
laborious,
institutionalized so that you can now discuss issues with the people.
But in terms of crowd, I mean, there was still a small crowd, sizable crowd at each of the events that they went for. Let me quickly throw this now to my colleagues in Lagos. I'm sure that they have questions for you. Gentlemen.
Mr. Yetok, some of those points, I mean, for the sake of argument, they're actually very interesting points. But I mean, when you look at the provisions of the Constitution, not even some of those bills, you begin to wonder how workable is it to have an incumbent be stripped 6 months to elections? I mean, the president is still the president, regardless of whether he's running for elections. But maybe we'll take on this some other time, but quite interesting points, I must say. And I think it's also good that both of you have participated in the election process. So whatever comes out of this, amendment will have its effect on your activities as candidates, as political parties. But let me quickly ask Mr. Tanko, especially regarding that funding, the workability and the enforcement. So during the process of election, the expenses, how well did INEC or other regulatory bodies, INEC I should say actually, monitor your spending such that they knew that you spent this particular amount for that election? Was it really enforced for your party and for your election?
No, I think what they just did was just to follow statutory protocol by asking you to declare your source of money and how did you spend it, where and when. And those are the things that they did. They just give you a form, and then you fill the form, and then you return back to satisfy all righteousness. But when it comes to the issue of enforcement, there was nothing like enforcement, because INEC didn't really look so much, but they were very, very critical as regard to reporting what you spend. And then eventually, they will send an auditor to come and audit what you said you spend and probably verify some of your records and ensure that it has followed due process. And that's all. So those political parties who are spending beyond the threshold were not penalized. And in fact, there was a lot of report as regard to the issue of campaign finances during the period last 2019 general election. At the end of it all, it was just like, let it just go. Nobody dealt with it in any way. So there is no particular bite as regard to punishment being meted on those who are. And these issues bring us back to some of the examples that have been laid down by United States, for example. The source of money is being declared. There is a public funding, like, for example, $45 million during the time of McCain and Obama. Okay, the public funding is about $45 million. But Obama, who wants to get more than $45 million, has to go out to seek for public support, where he got $150 million. But here, the difference here is that it is the people who donate, and then accountability is being given, and there's transparency in the system. Here, majority of the source of funding were not actually being as transparent as it were.
If I could just get a little more clarification on that. Just a minute, if you can. How did they audit your account? Did you submit your financial statements and to who? To INEC or what?
Of course. First of all, there's a campaign, there's a finance document that INEC gives to you as a CD, and in that CD, it gives you, it tabulates questions on how much did you generate, as when, and who gave that particular X amount of money. How do you generate that sum of money? And so, after you're giving this particular document to INEC, INEC will now employ auditors who visit your office to check those particular claims that you made, whether they are true or not. So the CD is being given to all political parties. I remember filling my own particular form almost after the elections in 2019. And in fact, INEC is so critical about it because there's a time limit being given for you to make returns as regard to those particular documents. So if you don't make it, I remember the INEC chairman coming out publicly to say ABC political party were able to submit within the time, and so political party did not submit at all. So the documents are there with INEC at the moment as we speak.
Okay, so that was for you at the presidential campaign level. Let me ask Mr. Echok, for you at the governorship level, was there any such procedure?
Yes.
Did it apply to you?
Okay. No, it doesn't apply to candidates, it's parties. And from what UNISA said, once we were together as party chairman, and INEC specifically said that one of the two parties that submitted was, as at then, YDP, where I was the national chairman. Probably his party was the second party. But, Chamberlain, that form is just an exercise in futility. That form makes no sense whatsoever to the best of my knowledge. That form is not for UNISA's party or my party then, or even my current party, because where do you raise 15 billion from? I'll tell you how party funding comes. I'll tell you the roles that banks play. I'll tell you that these monies, banks know how to get across to you so that it does not reflect in your report. I'll tell you all these things. Why can't they make such documents open? Those fund stuff, only apply to two parties, APC and PDP, and no INEC will have the guts, with all due respect, to publish what these two parties presented, because it would be absolutely ridiculous, absurd. It will be, I don't even know the word to use to it. So I think that we really should make laws that are enforceable. That's one of the reasons that I have a lot of respect for the current INEC chairman. If I fell in love with him, the first INEC...
Just a minute, before you proceed on that trajectory,
yes.
Just hang on a minute. Isn't that where perhaps both of you, in addition to civil society groups, come in here, in addition to some of these provisions that the country is talking about, adding this, saying, look, publish those details, spendings of political parties, if we need to entrench transparency? Isn't that where groups like yours, both of you, should actually champion or lend your voices to such provisions?
We have time and time again, even evoking this Freedom of Information Bill. But the question is, what is the sanction? Are you going to deregister the party? Are you going to ask them to pay penalty? I mean, why make a law that you can't see the end of the law? So sometimes when you go there, the question is, so if they're in breach, what do we do to them? You can't go ahead and say, I will remove your candidate. You can't do any of these things. It doesn't make sense. It's a law that I can't really see the end of. That's why I spend more energy on sanitizing the processes. Yes, you want to say something?
When you say the banks know how to get around some of these things, are you speaking from experience?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And I say it with every sense of responsibility.
You want to tell me about it?
The moment you become a candidate in one of the major parties, you see banks. I mean, I've been there with governors. Banks come, and it's like, I mean, I don't even know what to say. But
how did you play out in your campaigns in order to further entrench transparency so we can stamp this kind of practice out? Tell us about it.
The two things. Number one is that one of the reasons I decided to join ADC after I became partyless was because I had to sit down and look at the operating protocols of each of the parties. And as of today, ADC is one party that is making sure that parties, members donate. And then we're going back into strengthening parties, giving certain working guidelines, and it's working. And I'm happy.
What I meant was, you said that they provided avenue for you or for people or for parties or candidates to get around party funding. How did that exactly happen?
Yes. How did that exactly happen? I'll tell you two things. The first is that when they are auditing your account or your report, your financial statement, the benchmark is your account. So they know that if this money is put in your account, there will be a trace to it. Okay? And these are banks. So they will know how to help you navigate the mind. Chamberlain, this is what we all know. It's not like Nyaitok has come here to say anything that is interesting or that is a revelation. It's no revelation. Banks they want your FAC account. So they become your strategic election partners the moment they see that you are a candidate that can win an election. It's no secret now. Let's look at what's a secret.
Banks.
It's an open
how
secret.
So many of these banks are going
account.
to do this? I mean, for maybe like 10 political parties or 10 governorship candidates, thinking that maybe one of them will emerge victorious. So what if none of them becomes victorious? But that's a matter for another time. Let me ask Dr. Tanko.
Business.
Do you think, Dr. Tanko, is INEC in all of the things that Mr. Nyaitok has talked about, and you also may have experienced, is INEC in any way culpable in not being able to get the, in this melee of this final campaign funding that we're talking about? Is INEC in any way culpable?
No. You see, the truth about it is that there's one thing that you need to know.
I'm asking because, just one moment. I'm asking because, I mean, Mr. Nyaitok just said it, and it may be your experience as well, that the INEC is not able to publish the financial records or spendings of some of these political parties, especially the big ones. Go on. Go ahead.
They did. What they do is that they didn't go in details. One thing you need to know about this INEC chairman at the moment is that he tries as much as possible, whatever he's making his decision, he ties it around the laws of the land. So he will not be found wanting in any way. So anytime you make any position, he will refer you to the position of the law, and so flawlessly. And then you find out that whatever he's saying, you may not like it, but that is what the provision of the law is. In regard to this particular campaign financing, they published the document, but they didn't go into details. So the question is that he didn't say give details account as published, but they will publish that X amount of money was spent by social political party, and probably it has gone beyond the threshold or even below the threshold. And I've seen that they publish in newspapers and all. And in fact, some of the civil society political parties take it up. I remember J.J. Ojo in one of their NDI who are dealing with campaign finances, specifically elucidate and amplify on this particular campaign finances and give details account on how these finances were being spent, and even make queries as regard to some of the way in which the money was generated and how they were being spent, and also questioning the fact that the position that was being made by any of the political party may not be true, because when you find out that the expenditures are very, very clear, when you take a cost of a billboard around the state or FCT and the rest of them, you find that they spend more than what they are claiming.
You know,
and probably that is where EDOC is making reference to, that people are being protected in a way to make it not carry along, to carry out the details of their own spending, and then this spending is being hidden behind another expenditure head. So that way you will not see the expenditure being said, okay, this is what was used.
Okay, gentlemen, major point you raised. But pardon me, Mark, but let me see if I can just take their thoughts, few seconds of their thoughts on this. I mean, Mr. Yaetok, you had 70 votes during that previous election in your state, compared to the over 500,000 that the winner got. For Mr. Tanko, you had just about 3,799 votes, compared to the 15 million votes that the winner in the presidential election, President Buhari, got. So, looking at this law, if I can just get a few seconds, do you think it gives newbies or people with or parties that people would naturally say are not in the mainstream, does it give you better chances at the polls? Few seconds, please. Mr. Tanko first.
No, it cannot. It cannot, but I'm very, very proud of those figures you read out, because these are figures that came out from people who believe in me. They voted for me based on their personal conviction. I didn't go out to give money for stomach infrastructure. I didn't do that. I didn't have bullion bands coming into my house and all. But it's only my word that I was selling, and then they were able to believe in it, and they were voting for me. So, but when you look at all of these other political parties...
How many seconds, Mr.
I'll tell you. There's a very big law that you should understand. If you have a strong opponent, make him look ridiculous so that even going to the court sounds funny. They made a mistake. They should have given me 1 vote. But anybody who is from Akwa Ibom State knows who I am, and he knows that that's absurd. But make him look so irrelevant that you even kill his spirit of thinking of doing anything.
So that's what
is a strategy. And that is where, that's where this will stop, because you see the votes you had. So
just quickly, I did say that we're going to, I did tell Mr. Tanko that we're going to talk about Loretta Onyochie's appointment very quickly. And I just want to know, now that the Senate says, look, we're going to give her a fair hearing, anybody who has complaints, they should make sure they send their complaints to the National Assembly. What are your thoughts on that? Just quickly, I don't know if anybody who has an objection, have you sent yours?
No, I have not. But I publicly made it. I'm making one now. So I'm objecting to it, and seriously, not because of her as a person, as Loretta. No. It's because of what she represents. She's already in the cabinet of government. She's been an appointee of Mr. President. It doesn't look... In fact, I will be so disappointed if Mr. President go ahead with this nomination. Coming from the integrity level of Mr. President. We're trying to pollute a system already trying to rejuvenate itself.
There are people who argue that, people already have their biases anyway. Is it not better when it's open, that they're prone to even being fairer?
My approach is very simple. What are the laws? Can you be in INEC as a card-carrying member of a party? Is she? Can you be in INEC, the Electoral Board, as an appointee, a political appointee. Now, if these two are in the breach already, what is the fair hearing? Are you bringing her to come and confirm that she has a party card? Or are you bringing her to come and confirm that she's an appointee of Mr. President? The Senate President has a lot of work to do. It's just a matter of telling Mr. President, oh, these things don't apply, please, just replace. It's a simple procedure. Why do you allow the whole country to go running down the integrity of Mr. President when you could easily have told him, sir, this is inappropriate? And then if Mr. President insists, that be it. But if you love Mr. President so much, tell him that, sir, on account of 1, 2 is not okay. And it would have been solved long before the name even came.
This brought me back to one post that I saw. Hassan Usman Katsina was being asked a question that, as a governor, how do you compare yourself with the present government that you see? He said, let me give you a story. What happened was that I was a governor and I was allocating GRA plot of land in Kaduna. So there's this particular individual who was from Katsina State and he was the man in charge. So everybody applied and I, as a governor, applied. And when I applied, he saw my name. But when the list came out, people were being given. But I was not given as a governor. So the man came to my office and said, Mr. Governor, I come to visit you to tell you that I saw your application applying for a plot of land in the GRA that we are allocating. But I'm here to tell you that it is not right. You are not supposed to apply. You are supposed to take care of the people who you are governing. So I'm here presently to tear in your face your form. Look at it. I didn't give you, and I'm tearing, and I wish you best of luck. And Hassan Usman Katsina did not say, I say thank you for correcting me. This is leadership. That is how leadership is supposed to be. And if you want to be fair to the people, you exemplify by being fair to all and carrying everybody along. And that way, Nigeria will stay peacefully.
It's a fine place to live, gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Elite this morning. Ezekiel Inyaitok is Director General, Nigeria First Project, and Yunus Tanko is former presidential candidate of the National Conscience Party. We'll take a break now, and we'll be back shortly. Please stay with us.
More funding is coming the way of security agencies to confront the persistent security problems ravaging the country, as the National Assembly is passing a supplementary budget which is expected to see an upward review of the funding of some security agencies which were grossly underfunded or not funded in the appropriation bill. The National Assembly is approving the sum of 982.729 billion naira as supplementary budget, out of which 123 billion is for recurrent expenditure and 859 billion as contribution to the Development Fund for capital expenditure.
This House do consider the report of Committee on Appropriations for a Bill for an Act to authorize the issue of Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation for the sum of 982,729,695,343 naira only.
The Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, had disclosed to the Senate Committee on Army that the federal government spent about 54 billion naira in funding operations of the Nigerian Army between 2019 and 2021. Senate President Ahmed Lawan is asking the security-focused committees to ensure proper oversight of the deployment of the funds.
We expect our committees, the relevant committees, to be stiff, to be alive to their responsibilities for oversighting on how these funds will be deployed prudently
The Senate is also approving President Buhari's request for the authorization of 2.343 trillion naira as external borrowing in the 2021 Appropriation Act, which would be used to fund specific capital projects from priority sectors of the economy. The approval by the upper chamber follows the consideration of the report by the Committee on Local and Foreign Debts and is coming amidst concerns about the country's rising debt profile.
The committee also knows that due to shortfall in our annual revenue in relation to our needs for rapid infrastructure and human capital development, we have had to pass deficit budget every year, requiring us to borrow to finance the deficit in our budget.
The new borrowing was calculated at an exchange rate of 379 naira to $1 and is expected to be sourced through the issuance of Eurobond in the international capital markets. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
All right, welcome back. So as you've seen there, Professor Ken Ife joins us to give his perspective on this subject matter. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for joining us today on the program. Now,
good morning, and thank you for having me.
All right, so funding the budget 2022 of a 5.62 trillion naira deficit with borrowings. Yes, they've talked about prudent, applying the funds properly, but if you look at that, perhaps in context with debt to revenue, the service ratio, how sustainable do you think this is?
Well, first of all, let's agree that this amount of 5.6 trillion deficit has been agreed, that has been foreseen in the fiscal strategy paper and in the medium-term expenditure framework, and it was captured in the borrowing plan. And so it's not new money, as you would say, it has been agreed, and it has actually entered into the Appropriation Act for 2021. It's only just now that they want to operationalize it, so they need a resolution in the Senate to keep supporting that expenditure, and it is about 2.343 trillion that is up for raising. Now, back to how it sits within the macroeconomic framework and international best practices. The international best practice on loan for the debt, total debt to GDP is about 40%. We are around 21%. And don't forget that this is a moving target, because as we are taking loan, we are also liquidating loans. So that's why we've never faltered at all on debt service, even though the level of debt service is really open to question, and it could be better. That is actually where the risk is. Not on the borrowing, but the risk is on the ability to repay. And that raises a lot more questions than answers. But be it as it is, there is the necessity for us to fight COVID. And as you can see, we fought COVID to a standstill and exited within a quarter. And you could only do that because of a macroeconomic handshake between fiscal and monetary authorities and a quantitative response to both sides of the GDP equation. So that's why we had money going into the consumer side and then also to the production side. So we actually exited very, very quickly. So very unusual times, but bear in mind that where these monies are targeted are critical areas of the economy. The power will need to support cement, transportation will need to build more rail, agriculture and rural development saw some Brazilian investment coming in, health sector, COVID vaccine has to be paid for, defense, more money is needed for security. And so, human resource, you can't take it away, because we've been heavily criticized on human resource development. That's education and health. So I can say that what the Senate President said is what we need to listen to, watching the integrity of the spend and ensuring that every penny is spent according to the rules.
But what about the component of that borrowing which goes into recurrent expenditure in trillions as well? Isn't that a concern?
Well, let's make a distinction between domestic borrowing, which could go anywhere, and foreign borrowing. That is where the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, which is actually now being amended, appeared in the Senate 2 days ago in the Senate Committee on Finance, to encourage them to move the fiscal deficit envelope from 3 to 4% and stay, so that we can stay within the ECOWAS macroeconomic convergence criteria, and even also make sure that the government is investing not less than 20% of their revenue and salaries capped to personnel costs capped to 35%. So all of those are boundary conditions of fiscal stability that ensure that we are not looking only on debt, we are not looking only on revenue, we are looking at the totality of all the elements that come into the equation of building a sound macroeconomic framework and public expenditure framework. So that was my advice to the Senate on Tuesday. But back to your question, yes, it is it's a moving target, to be honest. And I think there are good reasons for us to spend the money that we are spending right now. And the balance, see, the Fiscal Responsibility Act requires that any external borrowing has to be for capital projects and human resource development. So that is the law.
Just one moment. On that particular issue that you just raised now, much of the challenge here, from what Chamberlain asked, I mean, would be anyone's concern. For instance, why borrow for even domestically for servicing recurrent expenditure for salaries and things like that? For instance, there's this report by a budget that says the FG borrowed 1.42 trillion naira as domestic debt as of June 2020. It only spent 446 billion naira for capital items, which means it continues to borrow to maintain recurrent positions. How do we checkmate this? Because if this continues, it would mean that it's never going to end. I mean, you've talked about just 21% as opposed to 40%, but paying back, that's another kettle of fish altogether.
There are three issues here. One is that the government is always at liberty under the law to borrow to balance their budget. But there are different types of borrowing. In domestic borrowing, the law doesn't say anything about where to apply the money. So they might well use some of that proceeds to finance recurrent expenditure. But for external borrowing, the law is very explicit, and that is FRA 2007. It says only for the purpose of capital projects, because that's where jobs get created and all of that, and for human resource development. What the law didn't clarify is whether it is the human resource development associated with the capital expenditure that you are borrowing for, or just any human resource development. So that's where the law is vague. So I just couldn't take them to task on that. The law is vague on that. Then the second point that you raised is the integrity of the borrowing. It is a matter for the National Assembly. And that's why I'm saying the Senate President really put it down squarely, go and monitor this money. Because one thing is to borrow for a particular purpose, the other thing is to find the money going elsewhere. So that's what he said. And there's nothing me and you can do except to look at the National Assembly that has the oversight function to go and look into what they are spending this money on. So that's the third one. But, whether should we borrow to pay for recurrent expenditure? This is why I was advising Senate 2 days ago, that we need to look at the boundary conditions around fiscal stability, because fiscal stability accounts for no less than 60% of macroeconomic stability. So we must make sure that we are addressing all the boundaries. And that's why ECOWAS has 10 macroeconomic convergence criteria to enable us to move into a single currency. And I mentioned some of them, and that they must be mindful and put them in the law. And one of them is that you must peg personnel costs to no more than 35%, so that we are not running a bureaucracy where 70% of the budget goes to paying salaries, and then there's little left for the rest of the country. So that is a international best practice. And of course, the second one was that the deficit has to be within range. And as I said, I was happy for them to push the envelope to 3 to 4%, given the times that we face. The times we face is that we have COVID. COVID is an existential threat, and these things are not there forever. Then the third one I did mention was that the investment must continue to be an integral part, that government investing its own money, part of its own money, minimum of 20%. That's where you create jobs, you create infrastructure, you make sure that the economy is having all that it needs to be able to support growth. So those are the things I said, have all of these boundary conditions in the act, so that the thing will now be on autopilot. all the MDAs will be operating on the same level, all the states, the subnational government, federal government, local government, they will all be operating on the same indices, because according to the Act, within Section 42 says, within 90 days of passing this Act, that was in 2007, the president should cause the Minister of Finance to advise him on the ratios in consultation with the National Assembly. And that hasn't happened. And so, because it hasn't happened, the ratios like I just mentioned this one, the fiscal deficit at 3%. Now, that's the only one that was passed in the law. Then the ratio of total debt to GDP was not there. Domestic debt to GDP, foreign debt to GDP was not there. Even the debt service to government revenue, which according to best practice should be about 40%, is not there in the law. And then not to talk of all other indices that could make things easier and make officers and all levels of government operate within known boundaries of fiscal stability. So that is what I was advising Senate on Tuesday, and I think they took it very strongly, that they're going to write it into the law, and it will be good for us. So that not every day we will work on the same debate. Should it be here, should it be there? No, it will be in the law, and they all work towards meeting. So when they are doing their budget, they will be testing the budget and say, oh, this amount is going to take us over the personnel cost. This one will take us over the debate. So they will be looking at those indices as they are preparing the budget.
You know, I mean, who knows how long it will take to reflect some of your suggestions in law. I mean, recent history shows that that can be quite tricky, referring to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, even the PIB, how cantankerous it has been. But you say one of your major concerns is basically the debt service to revenue ratio, which is almost at 100%, really. So basically, we're making all the money just to service the debt, at least for the period under review this year, according to the report that was released by the ministry. So borrowing maybe might not be the challenge. It is paying back and having at least enough to sort other things. Do you see a way out? I mean, we know that Nigeria got out of debt during the President Obasanjo regime by miracle, as it were. Is that what we're looking for this time, or we have a plan, proper plan, medium, short, and long-term plan to really get out of this?
The point I'm trying to make is this, that we have the resources within our needs to support the level of borrowing that we have. There are leakages. There are leakages in the system. The quantum of the leakages are horrendous. When they looked at the same assembly on Tuesday, we are giving figures, the figures that dwarf the actual revenue, the figures about what is being given as tax exemptions and all those incentives, they dwarf the revenue. Then you look at the monies that are not being remitted to the treasury by the MDAs. It used to be 122 scheduled corporations. The assembly says everybody should go in, which means we are looking at nearly 1,000 MDAs, which is good. Let's have everybody and let the auditors and accountants decide whether you make profit or you don't make profit, and then whether you remit it or not remit it. And they have strong enforcement. I really like the enforcement section of the new amendment. And to let me tell you, this amendment is just weeks away from implementation. So that I have come confident about that. But the issues are that there are so many hostages to this fortune, and there are boundaries that we must draw, so that managers know the tools that if you're going for medical checkup, is it only your blood pressure that you check? You check so many indices of health. You check your heart rate, you check so many indices that you check. So it's not just one thing or two things, borrowing and income. No, you have to look at all the boundaries of leakages and the payroll things. You've seen how many people are, all of those. So the boundaries are what I was mentioning to them, so that the managers, as they sit on their table at the level of the MDAs, local government, state government, federal government, they are all looking at macroeconomic indices, fiscal stability indices, that enable them to plan well and know what they are agreeing to as additional borrowing. So that's what I'm saying. We had, okay, look at the tax revenue to GDP, which hovers between 6% and 8%. The average is 18%. Now, the macroeconomic convergence criteria for ECOWAS says minimum of 20%. So what I recommended to Senate yesterday was to move between 15 to 18% in the first instance. Let's aim at that. And the Minister of Finance has a program, very, very radical program to boost revenue So they are heading to 3 times more revenue. So they're already heading in that direction. So they're not going to create any, it's not about overtaxing the existing tax constituent, but expanding the tax base, plugging the holes, and then getting all the assets to work, sweat the assets that we have. And one other thing that I also recommended to them on Tuesday was look at our assets. Let's do more borrowing based on our assets.
There are so many points to actually address on this matter. But, just as you highlighted, the MDAs, I mean, it's a huge one. It's not just about the tax, expanded tax base, I should say, because as we speak, I mean, there's several reports, several calls. I know my colleague, we call him Mr. Auditor General's report. He's highlighted that several times. The leakage is there. They're not being remitted. People need to see that these actions are being taken seriously. But we do thank you, as always, for your perspective this morning, Professor Ken Ife.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so let's see, where do we start now? I've spoiled for choice on some of the mails and how we need to proceed with this one. So who wants to break the ice?
Well, I'm going to begin with one from Olubayo Kolawole.
Okay.
Because I've seen, we've used some of them during the breaks. But Olubayo Kolawole says about rotational presidency, Nigeria's democracy is still fledgling. For a multi-ethnic, multilingual, diverse and already divided country where several entities feel marginalized and abandoned, rotational presidency is a way out. The North has the population to muster majority votes during elections. The South undoubtedly is currently the cash cow of the country. It sounds reasonable to entrench rotational presidency in our constitution. Secondly, we should work on true federalism, devolution of power, and a weaker center so that it does not matter again who is the leader at the center. Until then, rotational presidency is the interim solution.
About that, that's what the Constitution looked at. You have to have the spread in order to be made the president of the country. So if the Constitution wants to see that the person who becomes the president or who is elected the president is seen to have been elected, at least representative of the country, votes around the country. That's why they recognize that part of the spread. So who knows if those provisions will be taken on board.
And the question also is, so how long will this go on for, really? So is this what we want to do for the life of this nation? I mean, keep rotating. If that's what we want, we need to agree such that, so after another 8 years, another group won't come and say, well, you had it, and then it just keeps going round and round, and we'll never say, well, let's give it to competence. But, there's a lot around that.
No, but even at that, if they talk about competence, there are competent people in every part of this country.
So
and in every demographic.
Oh, yeah. We don't lack competent people. You can take that. That's a given. It is there. I mean, the institutions are supposed to support those people. So when they get in there, those things are always there. So it's always huge. Well, let's see.
Let me take this one from Professor Enakena.
Sure.
And it's about the rotational presidency. It says, we must work together as a people and subsume the inherent ethnicity brewing. Politicians must resist the urge of giving the herders-farmers conflict banditry a tribal coloration. It will then be obfuscating and divisive. We must realize that the disintegration of USSR has not made the components now independent states faring better. We must engage each other through collective, detribalized manner, he says. That's from Professor Enakena.
Yeah, and that's one of the good way to go. Okay, so Victor, talking about Nigeria's rising debt and economic growth, says, he who goes a-borrowing goes a-sorrowing. The borrowings for project is quite understandable. What I'm unclear about is the borrowing for irrelevant things. Why are we subject to this over and over? Debts we will pay back with oil and natural resources is not a way to go. Let's develop the resources we use as collateral so we won't need to borrow.
Very interesting.
Well, Kenneth has got a nice one.
This is the subject in today, saying, I'm sorry to say that the Nigerian government is not always thinking and planning ahead of the future, and that's a lazy way of building the economy. Hence the reason why government keeps borrowing money and not thinking of how to make any return on their investment. nothing is wrong if you borrow money, but government needs to start thinking of how to make profits from the money borrowed to service such loans. That's Demola's point. Some people say that's a bit tricky because government, yes, whatever is invested upon should yield profit, but must the profit always be quantified in monetary terms? Say, for instance, if you're investing in education, you know, at the end of the day, the profits you reap there will not be money, will it? So there will be different arguments, but definitely I think that his point will be taken on board. I don't know how many more we have. Matthew Dari is also writing on borrowing. I think it's a huge concern for many people. Nigeria's external borrowing says this administration continues to borrow with no practical significance of the impact in our economy or a reflection in our national lives. As a nation, we must go back to the drawing board and inject capacity into our citizens if we desire a positive change. Investment in human capacity development is the secret of economy buoyancy of developed nations. That's right. Matthew Dari. So I don't know how many more we'll be able to take. I think we just got a list now from our producer.
Yeah, we've got quite a number, actually. So this next one is from Kenneth. He's talking about the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. It says, to me, selfishness, partisan mentality are behind the delay by those who are responsible for the amendment and the approval of the Electoral Act to do the right thing, which is giving Nigeria an electoral law that can guarantee a free and fair or credible elections. But let's face it, the truth is that almost all politicians in the country are not short from business persons or investors. We must place their personal interest above that of the country.
Big one day. Well, take a look at George's mail, George Akpambo, on electoral reform, saying, why are the lawmakers scared of electronic transmission in the 21st century? They should do the needful if they are sincere. I can assure you that these electoral reforms will not change anything because there is a hidden agenda by those responsible for making laws in Nigeria. Some optimism, maybe.
Yeah. Well, still on the same issue, Henry says the fraud in the existing law is provision about substantial compliance with the Electoral Act. What percentage of this compliance is substantial? Why deny the umpire the right to call up an infraction when one is observed? We've dwelled too long on the mountain of caressing issues that threaten our national existence. Let's be bold this time to take a giant step, to a giant leap out of darkness.
Okay. Makwa?
Abe has this one. The Electoral Act Amendment Bill says, without doubt, it's obvious that there is something fishy about the proposed electoral bill. If not, why do they keep postponing the passage? Why are they afraid of laying it before the House? Just last week, the Speaker said the bill will be passed this week, and this seems a mere talk again after several promises. Who is afraid of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill? Who is afraid of a credible election? Big questions, Bankole Abe.
Well, Joshua Badong, still talking about the Electoral Act, says, we hope and pray that the National Assembly put words into action. But the question remains, must we cry out loud first before they know what to do next? Why shouldn't they have acted on this matter since after coming into power in 2019? Nigerians are watching.
Okay, let me just sneak this in. By the way, this is from yesterday. Stephen Aguncha. This is, of course, reactions to Southern Governor's resolutions. We've taken some others, but let's take this,
let's keep going.
This view. It says, I wish to say I strongly and totally support the position of Northern Elders Forum because a politician is from the South does not make it right to just hand him or her the president. And it says that is a lazy way of winning an election.
Well, Bamidele Kingsley, I don't know if we looked at this, says the notion that our debt ratio to GDP is low doesn't hold water. The question should rather be the ratio of debt servicing to revenue, the amount of borrowings that go into productive capital projects, the amount that goes into recurrent expenditure, the cost of funding government, the amount of borrowings that are stolen. In as much as borrowing is good, we're not borrowing right, and this regime should be barred from further borrowing. Well, Prof says the international borrowing threshold is about 40%. There was 21
to GDP.
GDP, 21%. Yeah. So what? That means what? We still have a lot of headroom.
But when you take a look at the revenue to debt,
yep.
I mean that's almost at 100%. So.
Question I'm asking is, how does this help productivity? If expenditure is not helping productivity, Malcolm talked about the fact that when you spend on education, you don't really expect money, but do you get productivity? If our spending on health is the way it is it producing productivity? If it is not producing productivity, why? Or why is it not?
That is, there are several dynamics and components to that. You can't look at that in isolation. But remember, the National Assembly, it's important that we also notify, because yes, it's good to expand the tax base, but the MDAs cannot be seen to be above the law. Because if they are being called to question to account for some of those funds, people need to see that they are abiding with the law, such that, yes, if you say we're increasing the tax base, nobody has a problem.
Does the law have teeth?
The law should have.
Does the law have teeth? There's the Auditor General's report. I'm sorry, does the law have teeth to bite?
It looks as if any year of that report you look at, there are lapses.
In trillions.
Oh, boy. Well, there you go, guys. That is it today. That is the show today. We want to thank you all for your mails, and we can't say keep them coming because they're always coming through, which we appreciate. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Kayode Okikelu.
Have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, let's hope that we get to see more rigorous debates, especially on borrowing, and a lot of Nigerians are concerned about that on the floor of both the Senate and the House. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maope Ogun Yusuf.